Paul, Tony Abbott and his colleagues came to power cutting the deficit. Why does the IMF say there's no need now?
Well, Yvonne, we hear a lot about debt and deficit here in Australia, and it's very, very easy to lose sight of the bigger global picture, and that Australia's debt is pretty low by international standards. Debt to GDP around 20%, compares pretty favourably with the rest of the advanced world. The average is around 72% debt to GDP, and when it comes to Greece, that number goes way up to 170%. So it's in that context that the IMF Australia mission chief, James Daniels, said that Australia does have the fiscal space. He says, "I think it would be useful to have higher public investment. Capital spending creates an asset and gives a return in the form of growth." Now, he made these comments towards the end of last week when giving effectively the IMF's country review to Australia. And it's a position backed up by Citigroup research as well. They say if government spending was allowed to increase at its average pace, we'd add half a percentage point to GDP and get towards that growth figure of around 3%. We're currently growing below trend here in Australia, Yvonne.
Now, Paul, it's politically speaking, though, it is pretty difficult for Tony Abbott, his government, to follow the IMF's advice, though, right?
Yeah, they did campaign extremely hard on reducing debt and deficit, and it was a very large stick that they used to beat the outgoing government with 18 months ago. So they effectively won an election on the promise of getting the deficit under control. The voters now associate deficits with bad. It's very hard to undo that perception now. If they were to reverse that stance, you can imagine that the federal opposition would have an absolute field day in Parliament and the media. So the government's really got to stick to what it's doing, which really leaves the Reserve Bank of Australia to stimulate the economy, and we've seen they've been trying to do that. The cash rate currently sitting at a record low 2%, so the government very reluctant to go to the loan market. And we had Treasurer Joe Hockey just yesterday on Bloomberg telling us that we've got the balance right in relation to fiscal policy. So don't expect the government to be taking the IMF's advice, Yvonne.